long before the rise of kingdoms and empires, long before Europe had borders or written chronicles. Scattered communities across the northern forests began to shape an identity that would echo through history. These were the early Germanic peoples, descendants of Indo-European groups who slowly settled the misty lowlands and river valleys around 1000 BC. They did not leave grand monuments or written records. Instead, their story lives through archaeology, oral tradition, and the quiet traces of everyday life. Imagine small farming villages tucked between dense woodlands, where longhouses sheltered entire families under one roof. These homes were not just places to sleep, they were centers of work, gatherings, and stories told by firelight. Their world was defined by the land, simple but hearty diets, carefully tended plots of barley and wheat, and livestock that sustained them through harsh northern winters. Their clothing reflected their environment too: wool, leather, and finely woven patterns that revealed status and skill. Yet beneath this humble daily life lay a complex social structure. Leaders emerged not through force, but through respect. Individuals valued for wisdom, generosity, and the ability to protect their communities. Slowly, these groups formed what archaeologists now call the Jastorf culture, a network of interconnected settlements that marked the early identity of the Germanic world. This is not just a story about ancient tribes, it is the beginning of a much larger journey, one that shaped languages, myths, migrations, and the foundations of later European history. And today, we are going to explore that journey in a way that is vivid, engaging, and grounded in what archaeology truly reveals. If you enjoy deep dives into the past and discovering how early cultures shaped the world we live in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. This adventure is just getting started. Life inside those early northern settlements carried a rhythm shaped by climate, kinship, and quiet codes of honor. After stepping into one of their longhouses, warm, dim, and alive with the scent of smoke, you would quickly realize that these communities were not simply random clusters of people, but carefully organized groups bound by bloodlines. Each village revolved around large extended families, clans whose identities stretched back through generations of memory. Every member had a place, from elders who safeguarded stories and decisions to younger adults who worked the land, tended animals, and stood ready to defend their homes. Within these structures were also individuals who served the household in various roles, contributing to daily work and making the clan stronger as a whole. Status expressed itself quietly but visibly. A visitor could understand a clan's influence not through loud displays, but through the size of its longhouse, the number of animals grazing nearby, and the quality of tools and fabric stored inside. Land was more than an economic asset, it was proof of belonging, a connection to ancestors and future heirs. Livestock, especially cattle, symbolized stability and prosperity, and caring for them required skill, cooperation, and seasonal discipline. Inside a richer home, one might find better craftsmanship, decorative elements woven into clothing, or well-forged items that hinted at trade or alliances beyond the village. For men growing up in these communities, identity was shaped not only by their clan's reputation but by personal conduct. While warfare was not constant, the need to protect families and resources fostered a culture of readiness. Weaponry, though simple, was maintained with care, and wearing certain items signaled maturity, pride, and responsibility. Alongside these martial elements existed a surprisingly refined attention to appearance. Despite living in rugged landscapes, they valued grooming, trimming their hair and beards, and sometimes using combs and personal items carried in small pouches. This was not vanity but a way to show discipline, self-respect, and readiness to represent their clan. Gatherings were essential moments of unity, when work slowed and seasons allowed. People came together to share food and drink, strengthening bonds that held the village together. In these long evenings, fermented beverages played a symbolic role, marking both celebration and communal trust. The act of sharing a drink was more than simple enjoyment, it was a sign of belonging and equality among those gathered around the fire. Conversations could shift from stories of ancestors to plans for future harvests, or even dreams of distant lands whispered by traders who occasionally passed through. Yet daily life was not all about status or ceremonies. Every dawn demanded effort, tending fields shaped by unpredictable northern weather, maintaining tools, caring for children, and preparing for the challenges of each season. Through these routines, the clans learned resilience and patience. They understood that survival depended on collective work and balanced leadership, especially from individuals who proved their worth through fairness, wisdom, and the ability to guide without imposing. In this steady cooperation lay the roots of their expanding culture, a web of settlements gradually shaping a distinct identity that would influence centuries of European history. Although life in those early northern settlements revolved around farming, kinship, and the patient work demanded by each changing season, a different current ran beneath the calm surface of daily routines, a current shaped by the ever-present uncertainty of survival. Villages might appear peaceful under the pale northern light, but beyond the boundaries of cultivated fields stretched forests and wetlands where danger was never far away. It was in this environment that the people learned to balance the steadiness of community life with the readiness required to protect everything they had built. Each clan understood that resources were fragile, and weather, illness, or bad harvests could strike without warning. In this reality, competition for territory, grazing land, and trade routes became part of existence, weaving notions of defense and retaliation deeply into their identity. The young men who grew up hearing the low conversations of their elders soon realized that strength alone did not define a protector. A capable leader needed to inspire trust and gather committed followers, offering guidance during both everyday tasks and moments when threats cast long shadows over the village. Those who managed this balance began to attract companions who valued skill, judgment, and reliability. In time, this circle of loyal supporters formed the core of a clan's defensive force, stepping forward whenever conflict loomed. Such leaders were respected not only for courage but for their ability to judge when to act, when to negotiate, and when to prepare for hardship without panicking their people. Travelers passing through these settlements sometimes spoke of distant groups competing for similar resources. News of shifting borders or new rivals could spark long discussions within a longhouse, where the firelight illuminated faces weighed with responsibility. When choices had to be made, leaders gathered their followers and prepared carefully, understanding that risk carried consequences for every family back home if they set out beyond the village. It was done with meticulous planning, scouting the terrain, choosing the right moment, and ensuring that those who accompanied them were committed to the cause. Through such experiences, bonds deepened, and stories of shared hardship became part of a clan's collective memory. Success in these ventures brought more than temporary security. It strengthened the standing of a leader and, by extension, the entire clan. People looked to individuals who demonstrated strategic thinking and steady composure, and these qualities gradually shaped early frameworks of authority. Over time, patterns emerged. Those who led well gained influence, and influence attracted more followers. These relationships grew increasingly structured, blending personal loyalty with expectations of guidance, protection, and wise resource management. In this atmosphere, leadership began to resemble the earliest forms of organized hierarchy, with confident figures standing at the center of networks that extended beyond immediate kin. Within the longhouse, returning groups brought back not only supplies but tales that would echo for months. reinforcing the idea that leadership and loyalty were intertwined. These stories reminded everyone that strength came from unity, and that a capable leader shared both risks and rewards with those who placed their trust in him. The bonds created through these shared endeavors subtly transformed social organization, establishing patterns of allegiance and responsibility that would echo far into the future. As generations passed, these early structures born from necessity, loyalty, and cooperation laid the groundwork for systems of authority that would shape the medieval world, proving that even in small, scattered settlements, the seeds of future societies were already taking root. Across the northern frontier, where cultivated fields faded into dense forests and shifting mists, the people of those early settlements gradually became aware that beyond their world stood an empire unlike anything they had ever known. Traders whispered of vast cities built from stone, roads stretching endlessly across distant lands, and legions marching with a discipline that seemed almost unreal, yet to the villagers who had spent generations defending their homes, these stories were not paralyzing, they were simply another reminder that the world beyond the trees was restless and unpredictable. Long before the empire's soldiers arrived, the clans had already forged their own traditions of leadership and unity, shaped by struggle and guided by loyalty. When the distant presence of Rome finally pressed against their borders, the people of the north met this new force with the same tenacity that had defined them for centuries. At first, Rome viewed the tribes as little more than scattered groups living on the edges of its expanding realm. But the empire soon discovered that these communities possessed a fierce resilience that could not be subdued easily. Generations who had grown up beneath the tall pines and open skies were accustomed to hardship. They knew their land intimately, the river crossings, the narrow trails, the hidden marshes, and they understood that survival depended on acting together. When disputes erupted and leaders called for defense, men who had spent their lives tending livestock or standing watch over the village gathered without hesitation. Their unity, built on shared stories and bonds strengthened by countless days working side by side, became one of their greatest advantages. As tensions grew, movement along the frontier became unpredictable. Groups migrating in search of new opportunities sometimes clashed with Roman forces, whose rigid formations were better suited for open fields than tangled forests. Stories began circulating among northern settlements about confrontations where Roman confidence had been shaken. Moments when the empire's disciplined ranks faltered against opponents who refused to fight on familiar terms. These tales traveled quickly, carried by traders, wanderers, and returning warriors. In longhouses lit by glowing embers, people listened closely, weighing the power of the empire against the determination of their own kin. In time, certain confrontations etched themselves deeply into collective memory. Leaders who had already earned trust at home now found themselves responsible for guiding their people through conflicts far larger than anything their ancestors had imagined. Strategic decisions required patience and a careful understanding of both terrain and timing. The clans knew they could not match the empire in numbers or equipment, but they possessed an advantage Rome often underestimated: the ability to disappear into forests, move silently through familiar paths, and strike where the land favored them. This way of thinking, born from generations of adapting to their environment, transformed the northern frontier into a place of uncertainty for even the most seasoned Roman commanders. When a coalition of determined groups managed to halt the empire's advance deep inside unfamiliar territory, their success became a defining moment for the people of the region. It proved that loyalty, knowledge of the land, and shared purpose could challenge even the mightiest force of the ancient world. As news spread across villages, families gathered by firelight to hear every detail, understanding that the struggles they faced were part of a much larger story. The empire's ambitions eventually shifted, confirming what the clans had always believed. Determination rooted in community could shape the course of history. And in those forests, where each settlement stood as both home and refuge, the people continued forging an identity that would endure long after the echoes of Roman ambitions faded. Long before the clash with empires or the rise of warrior leaders, the people of the northern forests lived in a world where every stream, groove, and stone seemed imbued with life, a realm where the spiritual and the everyday were inseparable. Their homes, modest longhouses of timber and thatch, often held small wooden carvings, not mere decorations but vessels of belief, each representing gods and forces that governed the cycles of the seasons, the success of their hunts, and the fate of their families. Odin, the wise and ever watchful. Frigg, protector of hearth and home. Thor, whose hammer brought both protection and power. And Tyr, the god of courage and law, were more than distant figures. They were companions in daily life, their presence felt in rituals, stories, and the whispered prayers of those seeking guidance before battle or blessing for a harvest. In the flickering glow of firelight, villagers would gather to listen to tales of these deities, stories that taught lessons, inspired courage, and reinforced the bonds of community, reminding everyone that the threads of human life were woven into a larger tapestry of divine forces. Spiritual authority often rested in the hands of seeresses, women whose insight bridged the earthly and the sacred. Their interpretations of dreams, omens, and the movements of the stars were heeded by leaders and commoners alike, shaping decisions that ranged from agricultural planning to military strategy. The counsel of these women carried weight, as they were believed to see truths hidden from ordinary eyes, guiding the people through uncertainty with wisdom drawn from both observation and intuition. Villagers would approach them not only with questions of survival and prosperity, but also with matters of personal conscience and social harmony, seeking assurance that their actions aligned with the favor of unseen powers. Archaeological discoveries offer glimpses into a spirituality that was vivid and sometimes stark. Sacrificial rites, preserved in bogs that held the remains of those offered to appease gods or ensure fertility, suggest a society deeply aware of the fragility of life and the desire to maintain balance with forces beyond human control. These practices, though foreign to modern sensibilities, reflected a profound engagement with the cycles of existence, a recognition that protection, prosperity, and justice were intertwined with reverence for powers both seen and unseen. The use of runes, carved into wood, bone, and stone, reinforced this connection, serving as symbols of knowledge, identity, and divine favor. Each mark a silent conversation with forces that governed the fate of individuals and clans alike. In the midst of forests, rivers, and open fields, these spiritual practices shaped the rhythms of daily life. Festivals and seasonal rituals punctuated the year, bringing communities together in shared celebration. Solemn reflection, or ritualized combat that honored deities and ancestors. Warriors preparing for raids would invoke Thor's strength and Tyr's courage, while farmers sought Frigg's protection over their livestock and Odin's guidance for successful journeys, even as they contended with the pressures of survival. Intertribal conflict and encounters with distant empires, the people of the North carried a sense of purpose rooted in belief, a conviction that their actions, guided by the wisdom of seeresses and the favor of gods, could influence outcomes beyond the reach of ordinary effort. In these intertwined worlds of flesh and spirit, of forest and firelight, the northern tribes cultivated not only resilience and cunning, but also a rich and enduring culture that would echo through the centuries, leaving traces of devotion and identity long after the sounds of battle had faded into memory. As the centuries unfolded, the echoes of Germanic life, with its forests, longhouses, and warrior bands, did not fade into oblivion. Instead, they left an enduring imprint on the cultural and linguistic landscape of Europe, a legacy that whispers through place names, the cadence of days, and the stories that parents tell their children around the hearth. The days of the week, so familiar to us now, carry the names of gods like Thor and Tyr, an everyday reminder of a worldview in which the divine and the mortal were intimately intertwined. Even in the seemingly ordinary rhythms of life, these ancient traditions persist, quietly shaping thought, language, and culture across generations. Folklore and epic tales preserve the imagination and values of these early tribes, stories that celebrated courage, cleverness, and the struggles between human ambition and the forces of fate. Figures like Frau, emerging from the mists of Germanic myth, embody moral lessons and social expectations, while grand epics such as the Nibelungenlied weave narratives of heroism, loyalty, and tragic destiny, reflecting the complexities of a society built on kinship, honor, and the constant negotiation between survival and morality. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were vessels of collective memory, codifying ideals and offering guidance for living in a world that could be as harsh and unpredictable as the northern forests themselves. Norse mythology, with its pantheon of gods, giants, and epic quests, carried the imagination of these people across seas and centuries, inspiring later generations to dream, create, and explore the boundaries of human possibility. Centuries later, this rich tapestry of myth and legend would resonate in works like Tolkien's Middle-earth, bringing echoes of Odin, Thor, and their epic struggles into modern fantasy literature, reminding us that the stories of the past continue to inspire and shape our understanding of heroism, adventure, and human courage. The survival of Germanic traditions in modern culture is a testament to the resilience and adaptability of human memory, the way in which ideas and values endure even as societies evolve and change. From place names rooted in ancient settlement patterns to the moral lessons embedded in fairy tales. From the days of the week to the echoes of epic poetry in contemporary literature, the heritage of these northern tribes remains visible and vital. It is a living connection to a world that once existed in the forests and fields, in longhouses full of laughter, music, and debate, in the fireside storytelling that bound clans together, and in the rituals and beliefs that gave life meaning and order. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the world of the Germanic tribes, exploring their daily lives, spiritual practices, warfare, and enduring influence on our modern culture. If you enjoyed this story and want to dive deeper into history, myths, and legends from around the world, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, so you never miss a journey into the past that continues to shape the present. Your support helps us bring these fascinating tales to life, connecting the echoes of ancient times to the stories we cherish today.